When you get to the FBI files, it's garbage. Okay, I'm not gonna. The FBI files are just a collection of every wacko out there in the world who wrote to them. And they have file after file of that. I did not read all the FBI. Once I went through enough of them that I realized there was no value to them, I skipped through it. But I read everything else like you did. And just like you, I recognized every single one of those instances. They're old hat. There's nothing new there. There is nothing new there except for one thing. And the one thing is this. The most important thing is this. I had to practice the art of authentication. I have to authenticate every book I have. I have to authenticate every document I have, all right? And that requires intensive study and critical thought and making sure, because if I buy something and it's not authentic, I've lost my money. And that's why you find death threats going on that are damn serious. And I can bring some of those up to you in the arguments today, and I will do that. Inside was a total of 568 original NASA photos, 9x11, of all the Mercury missions, of all the Gemini missions, and all the Apollo missions. I bought them all. And that is the best picture of a UFO. That's a NASA image that anyone has ever brought forward. And you will be amazed. They weren't lying. They don't have any UFO photographs. And the reason is right here in these 3 National Reconnaissance Office top secret memos where Brockway McMillan says, we're going to take their film, where Cooper says, over my dead body, and where Simpkinson says, what the F do you think you're doing?
The following program is presented for general information, education and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be advice of any kind. The content, views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals involved. The use of information on this program is at the user's own discretion.
Reverend Stewart, what is going on with you today?
Hey Mike, it's great to see you. Great to be doing this show with you as always.
Likewise.
I wanted to bring something up with you. In the news, I saw that a priest from the Catholic Church had been removed from his position as an exorcist because of some comments he made on a podcast recently. Have you heard about this?
So I think I know the priest that you're talking about, and I checked out the podcast that I believe you're referencing. I personally only made it like 25, 30 minutes. It was a long one, but most podcasts are, right? But after a certain amount of time, I couldn't take it anymore. It was too much for me to handle, and I don't mean, I just disagree with everything that man was saying. But there's a lot of people apparently who don't disagree with him. But so did you say he was removed though?
As an exorcist from the Catholic Church. So he made some comments, and he said in his personal opinion, some of the motifs or similarities have struck him between exorcism with demonic entities and some of these alien UFO encounters. Okay,
I mean, there's a lot to talk about there. We've had conversations here sort of at length on that topic directly, but just briefly, I mean, I can see how someone would think that with the lens of a Catholic priest, as it were, potentially, or other similar belief systems. But I also believe that we have little to no evidence that that's actually correct. But it's interesting to me that he goes publicly saying this stuff and then gets relieved of duty. Do I understand that correctly? Is that what's happening?
That's my understanding of what happened. And it really made me reflect, because I'm an independent Christian minister, as you know, and I'm free to say sort of what I want, within reason. I'm part of a church. In fact, I'm at the church right now, and the congregation are aware that I do this show, but I don't think they would veto me or remove me from my position if I made some personal comments about what I thought about UFOs or aliens. It's indicative maybe of the Catholic Church's position on this whole issue.
I think you might be onto something there, because that is very interesting. I mean, we've had, who is it, Pope? Oh my gosh, we're not scripted here, folks. Who is it? Pope Francis said that he would baptize aliens if they asked. Okay, and then one of the Vatican Observatory people, as it were, talked about it's okay to believe in aliens and, God made aliens too or whatever. So it's interesting. Okay, so what I want to try to say is the idea that the Catholic Church removed this dude from his exorcism duties after saying aliens are demons, to me signals they don't believe that.
We need to dig much deeper into that one, Mike. And I find it interesting that this was the original thrust of our show, where we wanted to interview spiritual leaders about their opinions on this phenomena. Here we have someone from a church discussing their opinion on the phenomena, and boom, sorry, you're no longer an exorcist. So I can see why people didn't come forward.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, how naive were we in the beginning when we thought that people would step forward? No, I mean we've talked to many. I don't want to go too far into the weeds. Let's table that and put a pin in this. Very interesting stuff. But today we're going to be talking more about the side of proof and physicality. What do you think about that?
Okay, we're starting to substantiate this issue. I like that.
Yeah, so if you recall, recently I was talking about when the U.S. government on their new website, war.gov/UFO, they did one dump and then they did number two. Between number one and number two, I know that sounds probably the wrong way, right?
Okay.
But maybe not. Hey, that's pretty interesting. Before number two came out, I noticed that there were 3 missing files in the first dump. There were originally 17 pages and 161 documents, and then there was 16 pages with 59, 58, something like that. There were missing files, and 3 of those 2 of the 3 were, I said it before, but I'm going to say it again because it's going to lead in. The audio recording and the transcript of the audio recording for the Gemini 7 mission, where I'm looking at my notes here because I don't have a photogenic memory. Frank Borman, he said bogey at 10 o'clock high, and then ground control's like, say again. That was there, then it disappeared. So perked up my spidey senses, right? So today we're going to talk with Ed Wilson, who is a UFO historian, an author, and a NASA archive researcher. And we're going to be talking about an alleged photograph that was taken during Gemini of what looks like a silvery disk above planet Earth in outer space, photographed by United States astronauts.
All right. This is a good one. Also, Mike, the fact that this information is released on a website that's war.gov, like, does that frame this kind of the way that the American government is seeing this? Like, you know what? We'll just place all our UFO information on the war site, not the peace site.
Well, I mean, there's no peace, Stuart.
Right? I see.
Where was that? That was from a movie. I don't remember which one it was. But no, it used to be, it would have otherwise been on DOD, Department of Defense, right? But that got renamed to War, Department of War. So that's why it's there.
I see.
But that's a valid question. Like, why did we go from the defensive to the offensive? We were Department of Defense, now we're Department of War. I don't know. It's bizarre stuff. But humanity, we just kill each other. That's what humans do. Kind of a
wow.
joke, but not really.
No, that's pretty sad, actually. Okay. So could you tell me more about today's guest, please, Mike?
Yeah. Let's get back on the path, Stuart. Thanks. So Ed Wilson, he's a UFO historian, author, NASA archive researcher. He's the author of a 3-volume investigation into a lost NASA Gemini 6 image preserved by Scott Simpkinson. And that's a difficult name for me to say, so I'm going to say it again. Simpkinson. Newly declassified top secret documents prove NASA lost control of its own space photography. A documented chain of custody case using NASA imagery, AI forensic analysis, and Cold War intelligence records reveal how a missing Gemini 6 image survived only as a controlled briefing artifact. What do you think so far?
Interesting. So you're saying that there's some third party that came and removed or obtained that information?
Yeah, that's what he's saying. There was apparently when they came back to Earth, they were intercepted, and someone stole the I don't know what to say, footage, right? The film, if you will. Much like when Kevin Day talked to us about someone comes on board the ship in the middle of the night and took away all the stuff with the Tic Tacs. When in 1965, when the astronauts landed, same thing happened. And I forget who it was, but the one astronaut was ready to punch the other dude in the face and defend the photographs, which I don't blame him. So yeah, that's apparently what's being alleged here. So we're going to do a deep dive into that.
Interesting. I think that was Gordon Cooper, because I did peruse some of this information before this interview we're conducting today. Also, Mike, I realize there's a weird parallel between the men in black and these government officials coming in, taking information or obscuring the facts very soon after the incident.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, we're going back to 65, right? So that's sort of the earlier days of all this. And it's sort of worth noting, not to get too far into the weeds, but as we progress through time, things seem to become less physical in nature or whatnot. It's kind of weird in that regard. But you're absolutely right. The men in black. Well, let's remember to ask Ed about that, if that may have been a man in black who took them. But getting back to Ed's bio, he wrote a 3-book series. The first book, The Simpkinson NASA Archive UFO, reveals the Gemini 6 lithograph and links it to mission anomalies and expert analysis. Book 2, Hidden Under Our Nose, confirms the object using 16,000 frames of RCA film, NASA photos, and cloud pattern matching. That sounds pretty darn sophisticated, if you ask me. And then book 3, The Simpkinson NASA UFO, the CIA sanitized briefing document they never intended you to see. Pull the wool from your eyes, a report to Congress. So using top secret documents from the Central Intelligence Agency, National Reconnaissance Office, and National Photographic Interpretation Centers proves that NASA lost control of the Gemini photography. Original film entered intelligence pipelines. Only sanitized versions were returned. The image survives as a lithographic briefing document, not a photograph, a controlled intelligence reproduction.
Oh, I see. Okay, so there's a bit to talk about today. Very interesting, Mike.
Absolutely, and in a way, to make this personal, this is starting to also give extra credibility to that statement that I was told a long time ago by someone who's would be in a position to know that we're not alone in the universe, because their spouse was a very high up ranking person in NASA around this time. And
wow.
Why would so it's interesting how it's all sort of coming together, or coming out, if you will, right?
Extremely. Oh, wow. Yeah, I wouldn't mind if you mentioned that if you get a chance during the discussion.
Well, I mean, if I kind of feel like I just did, but if you want, I could do it again. I don't know.
I meant when our guest's here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Perhaps I'll if it fits, I'll throw that in there too.
Okay.
So without any further ado, Universal Disclosure Podcast proudly welcomes Ed Wilson. Okay, Ed, thanks for joining us. Welcome to our channel here and our great conversation. And just to, let's see, hopefully we can get everything talked about, because you had mentioned sort of off air that you have no power right now and you're on your phone, so hopefully we've got enough battery to go with you here. But just to get right down into it, what sparked your curiosity about UFOs in the first place?
Well, guys, first of all, let me tell you, you guys are really good investigators. Anyone who doesn't listen to you needs to see your last podcast. The last podcast that you did was fantastic. And I'm going to start with it because I have 2 answers to it, and then I'll just get out of that quickly. But it just bothers me. I wish I wouldn't have listened to it last night, because I got the answers to the 2 questions you posed. What you posed were 2 questions. Number 1, here's the first thing that you did so well that people need to understand, that you have the exact kind of analytical mind it takes to solve these complex situations. You looked at all of the releases from Dow, Department of War, and you looked at it with a determining eye, and you saw what many people missed, and I picked it up too, is that there were missing files. You saw that. Guys, they said that on the podcast. In case you didn't catch it, it's really worth listening to. They picked it up, and then you did the great investigative work, which I don't have time to do, and you don't either, but you did it. And what you brought up what was the sequence? The sequence was the astronaut sequence where they talk about a bogey. And so
Yeah.
you said you didn't know what it was. Okay, that's Gemini 7. Okay, what I do in my research is everything I do is documents. I don't do stories from anyone. I don't do alleged anything. It's all documents. It's all written NASA records. It's all that can be found and verified. And one of the things that I do is I read every single one of the Gemini transcripts, voice transcripts I could get a hold of, because the voice transcripts give a lot away. And what you need to realize out there, kids, you guys who are picking up on UFO studying, you need to know that every one of those transcripts was secret for 12 years. The one that I focused on, my Gemini 11 mission, the mission was 1966. It was secret for 12 years. You can look on the cover. It's in my books, and it'll show you right there under penalty of law. Don't be divulging this stuff. It says right there. And a lot of the things that you will see in my pictures and images are exactly that. They're exactly from the voice transcripts. Then you also listen to the debriefings. I listen to all the debriefings, the astronaut debriefings. And that's where some vital information came from. And the most important thing that you can do, kids, is you need to go to the Gemini 11 mission reports. All these are secret for 12 years. That's why a lot of this stuff hasn't come out. You have to have the inclination to do what you guys do so well, which is study. You have to be able to read vast amounts of data and comprehend it instantaneously, because there's no way we can go back through it again and again. I heard you on your podcast say, well, I found the one of them, but I can't do the other. So this is going to be the end of just letting these people out there know what a good job you do and how they need to emulate what you guys do. You asked the question about the bogey report. That's from the Gemini 7 mission transcripts. One of the things that's interesting, too, and I forget which one. In my book, I have the Gemini 10 report where they talk about they're conversing. Now, in the Gemini 10, they were conversing between themselves, and it was like nighttime. And of course, NASA was listening in, but it was just between them. And then they said, do you see that? Do you see the two dots over there? What are those? And they converse and they converse. And it's about a 5-minute conversation. And they're describing the dots and what they see. And they're saying things to each other like, should we tell them? Now they're aware that they're listening. These are in the actual voice transcript. Should we and I have the photographs actually that'll go with it. There's so many things I want to cover. I'll keep going. But one of the things that they say right there, after they talk, and he says, should we tell them about this? Should we mention it? And the one guy at first says no. Then the other pilot says, okay, let's tell him. And then he says into the microphone, even though they were listening, Mission Control, have you been following our conversation? And Mission Control immediately says, yes, we have. and then he says, and then they go in, they talk about it briefly, and he says, you want to make sure you remember to sanitize. What's the word they used? To delete this conversation. Okay. And that's in voice transcripts. So that's very good. And you guys picked up on the missing transcripts. So that was the Gemini 7. The other thing I was going to point out on this is you have to understand a little bit of the orbital mechanics go on and what was going on back in the 60s and 70s. Basically, all of the manned missions are equatorial plane. The craft go in orbit that's around the equatorial plane. Well, it's great, and we have wonderful pictures of a great slice of the world, but you only get a certain slice of it. You can't get up into the northern latitudes where you can get the Soviet missile sites and stuff like that. So consequently, what happens is in order to get your entire world sequence, you have to have polar orbits, right? Which means that you go from the South Pole to the North Pole, and then as the Earth rotates underneath you, then you're able to pick up the whole Earth, okay, eventually in a sequential nature. So with the manned missions, you have a limited capability of getting all the Earth. In fact, you can't get the whole Earth. But that polar orbit you do. And you will look at some of those voice transcripts, and some of the things that they say, oh, these are ice crystals. Well, what they're saying is this, well, we see them going, and they're going into polar orbit. Boom, right there again. Think about that. Wait a minute. Those ice crystals can't be going into polar orbit, right?
Yeah.
that kind of debunks it. So anyways, we'll get in. I wanted to compliment you guys. Oh, and the other one is this. Your great thing was you said, and I loved it because I read it and the entire Dow Department of War download too. Not the entire thing. When you get to the FBI files, it's garbage. Okay, I'm not going to. The FBI files are just a collection of every wacko out there in the world who wrote to them. And they have file after file of that. I did not read all the FBI. Once I went through enough of them that I realized there was no value to them, I skipped through it. But I read everything else like you did. And just like you, I recognized every single one of those instances. They're old hat. There's nothing new there. There is nothing new there except for one thing. And the one thing is this. Now, I couldn't download the darn volume 1, the first release they did on May 8th. If you go to the May 8th first release, go to page 16. It's 17 pages, right? The second to the top, second from the top article is Apollo 17. And it shows one image, and that's what you were talking about. Some of the files are one image, some of them are hundreds of files. If you look at that one image, that's what I sent you in the memo, that you can take the picture and use it. Although I want you to be very careful because I've got I have the scientific report by the scientists who work for the Pentagon. I have the full thing. That is that Apollo 17 memo in the Dow that I just told you to. Page 16, second from the top, it says Apollo 17. Look at the picture. It shows the Apollo 17 mission on the moon's surface, and it's taking a picture of the mountains in the horizon. And there, above the mountains and horizon, is a 3-dot UFO. Well, I have the 17-page photo analysis. That's all they say. But here's the significance of it. The picture I sent you actually is from another page. That is not there, okay? So you have a page from the full report that nobody has seen. They have not released that. And it shows a UFO. So that's in your memos. But here's the important thing now. What my research has finally culminated in, my final addition to my last book came into my house 10 days ago. If you release this fast, you will be breaking the news that nobody else is bringing. You listeners out there, if my battery holds out, the darn power went out here today, severe storms, and I'm doing this on my phone. So I apologize if I speak quickly and stuff like that, but I don't know if we're going to be able to get this done. But you will be releasing today things that no one else has heard. And as a second thing, before I forget it, 2 weeks from Wednesday is the Disclosure Forum. Are you guys aware of that? It's held in Washington, D.C. It'll be held on the 24th of June. If you need to speak with me, I will be staying at the Royal Sonata, Washington, D.C. Capitol Hill Hotel. I'll be there for a week. I'll be arriving the Monday before the forum, and then I'll be staying through Sunday as I do some discussions with people. So that's where you can find me. And if you need to get in touch with me, like you guys, I'm on podcast.com. And it has my contact information, as does Podcast FM, I think. But that's if you need me. And like I say, the Disclosure Forum is going to have Christian Gillibrand. It's going to have Burchett. It's going to have Abby Loeb. It's going to be a great meet. So I will be there that week. Look forward to seeing you guys there if you can get there. There's still some hotel spaces. So it's going to be well worth. I'm excited to be there. Now, gentlemen, who I am. My name's Ed Wilson. Okay. I started out originally as a rare book and document dealer. My whole life has been an absolute addiction to reading. Cheesy cow. I read science. I read math. I read history. Those are my favorite things. And it's just an addiction. Started when I was like 13 years old. My parents bought a 1959 Funkin' Wagnall Encyclopedia, 24 volumes, and I picked one up today, went into the bathroom, and I read every single page of all 24 volumes, start to finish. I couldn't stop. So I'm one of those kind of people, and that's the kind of people you are too. So the only skill I have is I have a great reading comprehension capability. I read fast, and I comprehend when I read it. And that's the only thing that makes me different from anyone else. But it's also, I see the same thing that you guys share, because you're able to comprehend. You picked up immediately on the missing numbers there. I thought no one else has done that, but by God, you guys did. You guys are great. So that's what I started out as doing, and was just a rare book and document dealer. I looked for rare books and historical documents at local auctions that no one is aware of, because not everybody is, it's very useless what I do. I read history, and I don't do the other things that people do, but I do have the ability to read and see those things and know that they have value. And I love treasure hunting. So I will go to auctions. Many's the time I've picked up a book for $1 and sold it for 10,000. I sell these things in for houses. So it's fun. So guys, historians, there's no way you can make any money, right? Let me tell you, historians, your money is in local auctions, okay? Because I've got things that are in museums around the world that I just can't believe that, they would have ended up in trash. So that's a good thing. So that's what I started out as a rare book and document dealer. I had to buy every book myself, right? Now, some of the books, not everything was $1. A lot of them I had to make judgments, and dealing with the auction houses I did around the world, I had to make an assessment as to what my profit margin would be, and if I can get it, and if it will really pay off. And the most important thing is this: I had to practice the art of authentication. I have to authenticate every book I have. I have to authenticate every document I have, all right? And that requires intensive study and critical thought and making sure, because if I buy something and it's not authentic, I've lost my money. So that's the treasure trove of information and skill set that I brought to this field of UFOs. Now, basically, I've always favored UFOs. Geez, cow, who doesn't? Growing up as I did during the early space age. I mean, I was 14 years old, and I remember standing on the front porch of this house at 11 o'clock p.m. and looking at the moon, and a bright harvest moon here over Ohio with a clear sky, where I could actually see it and say, those men landed on that day. And I gazed at it, and I was only 14 years old. So we followed that specifically here in my family. My dad, who's now dead, just died 6 months ago, taught us all one thing. Now, he only had a sixth grade education coming from the coal fields of Virginia. But with his sixth grade education, he taught himself a lot of things. And the one thing that he passed on to us that was the most important thing that he drilled into us was think scientific. Grammatically, he couldn't say it. Think scientifically is what we would have said. But he drilled the concept in and think scientific when you analyze something. And so that's what I bring to all the work that I'm doing with these UFOs. This occurred 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I went up to an auction up around Lewis Airfield, which is up between Akron and Cleveland, Ohio, and it's now called Lewis NASA Space Center, okay? Lewis Airfield was the original home of NACA, okay? And everybody knows NACA was the predecessor to NASA, right? Well, in 1943, a young man from Cincinnati, Ohio, graduated from the University of Cincinnati. Actually, he was from Piqua, Ohio. Graduated from the University of Cincinnati with a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering. He went to work for NACA in 1943, which was the Army Air Force. Remember, things change. That's the other thing in these document searches. In document searches, you have to be able to realize that all these titles of departments change. And it's bad enough that they use a whole string of letters in defining them, let alone when they change the name of it and you got a whole new string of letters, but it's the same organization basically. But NACA was there to test all the aircraft components in World War II in 1943 when he started. Specifically, they were specialists in destructive testing at Lewis Airfield. It was the Army Air Corps, and he was working specifically on propellers. So he was doing the advanced research on getting the best propellers they can to equip fighters and bombers that were being utilized in that horrible, horrible war where so many people died. And then, believe me, that war affected the whole generation that bore me. And those are the guys who started NASA. And that's what all the documents I have are pointing out. And that's why you find death threats going on that are damn serious. And I can bring some of those up to you in the arguments today, and I will do that. But anyways, that's where Scott Simpkinson started in 1943. You remember 1947 was when the Roswell UFO happened. Well, Roswell supposedly was taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base 3 hours away from where Lewis Center is. So I'm not saying anything because I'm not going to go into the Roswell stuff. That's not my forte, but I find it very interesting. And I did happen to read the entire book of Philip Corso. Philip Corso, an amazing man, and a lot of things that he says in there are very, very confirmable, and they're also very telling. And, you have to do the research on everybody who does something too. You need to do the research on me, but you don't have to believe me. You don't have to trust me. Everything I'm telling you comes from authentic documents that I give you exact location, where to find it yourself, and read it for yourself. Don't trust me. I don't trust anyone, okay? I understand the frailties of human beings. It's not a winning proposition to just go ahead and trust somebody. You need to be careful in the world. Now, sometimes you can go ahead and do it if the consequences aren't great. But gentlemen, there's no greater consequence than what you and I and our ilk are trying to determine right now as to the reality of the situation with UFOs. I was not a UFO guy, okay? But I was a space guy, and I was a scientist. For fun, I read physics and mathematics, okay? Quantum Magazine, Dust Magazine, I can tell you about, because they'll specifically take each university paper that's been written that goes into their synopsis and explains it fully. And it's all easy to click. Kids, you got to remember something. When I was growing up, we didn't have handheld calculators, okay? These early space missions that were being calculated, there's 150 photos in the very first book I had. The first book has 657 pages. I went to the auction. The auction was and was advertised as the auction, NASA space auction for Emily Ertle. And that's Emily, Ertyl. Ertle was her name. Well, lo and behold, no one thought much about it. And you look up Emily Ertle up on the Google search and all that stuff. You find, she worked for NASA. She got a couple awards and stuff like that. She was a secretary. Well, what nobody knows for real, and what I discovered, is Emily Ertle was the very first female employee at Cape Canaveral. I have a copy of the newspaper right in the book. Everything I have is in the book for you to look at. You don't have to. And believe me, trust me, the very first female employee at Cape Canaveral, and the story behind it is this. Emily Ertle, when she died, she left this collection that I purchased to her nephew, who was like her only surviving child. But what they don't know, and which you can read in the New York Times, which I also include the obituary of Scott Simpkinson. Scott Simpkinson was the very first team leader that when the Space Task Group was formed. When the Russians launched the Sputnik and the United States panicked, they formed the Space Task Group. And Scott Simpkinson, I have a wonderful picture. I sent you these pictures that should be on the back there. There you go, kids. Let's see if you can see it. Do you see that? Probably the wrong one. And anyways, there, Emily Ertle.
If I could just say real quick,
yes.
You were Ed. You were nice enough to send a whole bunch of photos to us in advance. So as you talk about the photos, I'll put those photos up in post production, so everyone will be able to see. Now, audio only, folks. If you're out there listening, as you always do, just know this is probably going to be one of the more visually based conversations. You can check it out on YouTube or Genshin World Network.
Yes, that's great. That's great, because we'll just go on into it, because you're going to find that this is a photo-intensive series of investigations. The photo that you're looking at shows Emily Ertle nestled in the arms of Scott Simpkinson, which the New York Times obituary says, and she was his longtime friend, okay? And this back when Scott was married, okay? And when he got married, he and his wife up in Cleveland, working for the national NACA, had a child that was somewhat disabled. And I've got the archive I bought is fantastic. You've got letters from all the astronauts saying, hey, I got these stamps for your daughter. I hope she likes it. And thank Emily for doing this. But when he came down, when they took him and they made him the leader of the Space Task Group that would form NASA and build the very first control rooms, build the very first Mercury capsules, and run everything from the engineering standpoint for mission control, that was him. And it was very, very primitive times. You'll see the very first Mercury capsule. There's 150 pictures in there from the very earliest NASA, from the Space Task Group. And they showed the capsules on the back of pickup trucks. And kids, the pickup trucks have split windshields on them, okay? Let me tell you why they had split windshields. We didn't have the technology to build a single piece of safety glass that would keep you from getting torn to shreds when you went through the windshield without seatbelts, right? Times were different back then. Not that we didn't have the internet. And that's the other thing that's in there. There's 115 pages of newspaper articles that Emily Ertle put together because she was the first female employee at NASA and she was in charge of records. And later on, she had top secret. I have the very the only copy I know of the Apollo 13 disaster. Scott Simpkinson at that time was the chief safety engineer. And when the Apollo 13 was, when it was an out live or die situation, he was the one who issued the command report that an emergency has happened. The mission has been declared a failure and we're in an emergency process. And I have that in it. And the very first person that got called on the list, now it comes and it says right there, from the desk of Scott Simpkinson. Okay, so that's who this guy was. I mean, he's an unknown figure in there. But it says, from the desk of Scott Simpkinson, it's been declared a mission failure, and we now will enter the process, the emergency procedure process list. And right in there, the first person that gets called is, I should forget the astronaut. He was an astronaut first, but then he went on to be Major somebody. He was the NASA chief of that mission. He was the mission commander, right? And at mission control. And then the very second person to be notified was Emily Ertle. She's second on the list. And so Scott Simpkinson issued the declaration. Then they called the Army and said, we got a problem, mission, we have a problem. And then the second person notified was Emily Ertle. And it was her responsibility to contact all the other people at the bottom of that. There's fascinating things in these, Trev. In the last 5 or 6 pages, it has every engineer that was called in. It has every personnel head. It has their home address, and it has their home phone number. And I have the only copy of that. This archive was amazing, but the reason nobody knew how great the archive was because it wasn't listed in the auction as Scott Simpkinson's. It was listed at Emily Ertle. So people often wonder how I got away with buying it. Well, let me tell you, I paid an awful lot of money for it. But it was well worth it. In the archive, I bought 31 3-ring binders that Emily and Scott had put together. 31 3-inch 3-ring binders. Inside was a total of 568 original NASA photos, 9x11, of all the Mercury missions, of all the Gemini missions, and all the Apollo missions. I bought them all. Guys, these are in the first book, or at least the entire Mercury archive is in there. Like I said, 150 pictures, many of them one secret. You can see blown up debris. And the whole story is told in there. There are mission reports. Everything's beautiful. But the important thing about that, it's kind of pricey. And the reason is this. You have 150 full-page pictures of the best, earliest photos ever. And he's the guy who was heading that program. And this is his archive. And they're 9x11. But I didn't sell any of those, but the 568 that I did purchase, I took 230 of them. I sold them at Heritage Auctions in the March auction of 2023, I believe. And just to show you how good these pictures are and the authenticity of, we talked about authenticity. You want to know how authentic this archive is?
Yeah,
this
please.
is how 230 photos sold at Heritage Auctions. They're listed under Scott Simpkinson too, so you can find them at auctions for $80,000.
Oh, dang.
So the book you're getting is real treasure trove information. So that's what happened. That's how I found the archive. When I got into it, in the back of the binder for Gemini 11, after starting to archive everything and prepare them for auction and find out exactly what I had and do the research, it was on all the information that we had in there. When I did that, I got to the last page of the Gemini 11 binder, and lo and behold, right inside that archival paper, I looked at it, I did a double take, and I was writing in my notepad, and I was writing down every photo number, S66, 54585, et cetera, listing them on and on and on. And right in my notepad, you can see right there, just like the guy at Ohio State University when he got that signal that he thought was an alien signal, I wrote, wow, big letters, underlined 3 times with that. It's the lithograph that you will show now. So right now, kids, I'm sure these guys are showing the image. It's the Gemini 11 lithograph, which is after all the research, I've determined that it is a CIA briefing document. I've got tons of research that'll show what that is. and we'll get into that later. But what you see is you see an actual lenticular flying saucer style UFO in the lithograph hovering above the surface of the Earth. The Earth is on the horizon, and you can see cloud patterns, and that is the best picture of a UFO. That's a NASA image that anyone has ever brought forward, and you will be amazed. And I'm sure they're showing it to you now. Now there's lots of evidence that has to go into it. Like I said, I've read thousands and thousands of pages. I finally got into the top secret documents now that are beginning to bring the truth of the matter together. There's all kinds of trails and tracing that I have to do. But before anything happens by bad luck, and then I'll take a little break and you can get into it and ask your questions in a more sequential manner. Kids, I'm about to run out of power, and I want to get this most important revelation that I'll be talking about when I get to Washington, D.C. in 2 weeks. And it starts very simply, and this will be in the third book. Kids, I put pictures on the covers of all my books. You don't have to buy the darn books, okay? I put pictures on the covers because I don't need the money. Good God, I'll be dead soon. What am I going to buy? A bigger coffin? I'm more interested in you guys taking over and following and pursuing what we're all pursuing, which is the truth. So when you go to Amazon or go to Google, put these words in to get to it, because Amazon screwed up. I have a common name, and they got me under the wrong author, and so all 3 books aren't in there. All 3 books are good. Read the cover blurb on each of the Amazon books, and it will tell you exactly what they cover, because it's a 3-year investigation. And I went from one string of documents, which led me to the next string of documents, and now to the third string. So the title of the book, what is the darn title of the book? This is the title of the last book, and this is the one with the blockbuster headlines that I'm going to give to you now. It's actually called the Simpkinson NASA UFO, but that won't bring it up. That'll bring the first book up, okay? Like I say, I'm not going to argue with the AI at Amazon. And so if you get any of my books, just click underneath where it shows the author thing, and it says other books by author, and that'll bring it to you. But here's the only words you need to put in to a Google search or Amazon search. The Simpkinson Briefing Document, or the Simpkinson NASA Briefing Document, or that. But those ones will differentiate the third book from the other 2 books. All 3 books have the Simpkinson UFO in the title, and that's very difficult for them to substantiate the difference between them in their website. But when you go to Google search the Simpkinson Briefing Document. That'll get you started in there, because there's all kinds of information. In the last 3 years, I've been able to get a lot of the word out there on what I was investigating. But here is what you will get in the last book, part of it anyways. And I'm going to read you a newspaper style headline, and I believe I will be able to authenticate it for you right now with 3 short top secret memos. Here it is, kids. The National Reconnaissance Office hijacked NASA's UFO photos and never gave them back. Top secret NRO documents. NASA film intercepted. Astronaut Gordon Cooper threatened fistfight as images were seized, downgraded, and never returned. You ever wonder, for 70 years, everybody's been out here doing analysis of all the photographs that NASA has printed out there. You can go to Arizona State University, ASU, March to the Moon is the name of the program, and you can find all the early photographs, the Mercury, the Apollo, the Gemini. You can find the Hasselblad cameras. You can find the Maurer cameras. You can find all of those there in the finest detail that they could get them for. And that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. When I told you that Arizona State University, not Arizona State, when I told you about the Dow first batch tranche, the Apollo 17, here's the key. Here's a quote directly from Johnson Space Center, Oral Histories of Richard Underwood. For those of you who don't know who Richard Underwood is, Richard Underwood is the man in charge of NASA photography from its inception when Werner von Braun called him until his retirement, I think, in about 2000, something like that. He was in charge of, and this is a quote right from the 41 page. Go to the oral histories, Johnson Space Center, oral histories, Richard Underwood, somewhere in about page 30, page 40, somewhere in there. This is a direct quote. Nobody has ever seen more than a third generation image.
Wow.
Don't believe me. Don't believe people. They'll lie to you. Go to where I told you. It's in my book. I have page references. Everything is referenced, even paragraph references. That's what all the work is and why the books suck in a lot of respects. They suck because I'm trying to get you to see it's true, okay? And not everybody has the time to read through voluminous volumes of information and extract the vital parts. So I tried to siphon the vital parts down, and I just gave you a quote right there that you can look for yourself. Nobody has ever seen more than a third generation NASA photograph. That's quoted from the text and NASA's own oral histories, Richard Underwood. Not only that, but let's talk about how serious some of these things are. One of the things that's important about why all this secrecy occurred, this secrecy didn't come about because of UFOs, kids. What caused all this secrecy was this. The exact same thing that caused that space task group would be formed was when the Soviet Union in 1957 launched the first intercontinental ballistic missile, the R-7. Now, kids, these guys had just lived through the most horrific war we can imagine. World War II was devastating. It was horrifying what people lived in, the condition we were reduced to. The world back then, oh my God, it was a horrible, horrible situation. And we were on the verge of a new war. The Cold War was on the verge of a nuclear war. But here's what happened in 1957 when the Soviet Union released that R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile, the first one. Well, we had radar stations all over, okay? They were in Alaska. They were all over the world. We had them pinned in with radar stations. But guess what? We were used to these big, what was it, Tu-34 or something, Soviet lumbering propeller craft actually carrying nuclear bombs over to get us. They would carry them into Europe, and it would be a 4-hour flight minimum to get those nuclear bombs over your head. 4-hour minimum. When that R-7 missile launched, the leeway for nuclear war was no longer hours. It was minutes. Now, believe you me, these guys in charge of our protection pretty much made a doo-doo in their pants, and if we had known it was going on, we would have done the exact same thing. It was reduced from hours to minutes, and it was a shock. Consequently, all the secretness that has enveloped the UFOs was to protect our information as we tried to survive. It was not made secret. It was an act of desperation, okay? That's why all this stuff happened. We didn't have kids. When that Sputnik went around the world, and when we started learning, there were no space treaties, okay? Who's to say if it's an ICBM or if it's a nuclear ICBM up there or a manned spacecraft, right? We did not have treaties to verify this. We had treaties all over the world about, oh, you can't come within 3 miles of the border. If you come within 3 miles of the border, you're subject to our boarding and yada, 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 yada. Treaty. We've divvied the world up for years and years and years, but we divvied the oceans up. But we had not ever divvied space up. And now space was a new frontier with no treaties. That's why when I was a kid, every time after recess, they would ring the bell and say, okay, alert, alert, alert. And I had to crawl under my desk and cover my ears and my head with my hands and shut my eyes and hope to God that hydrogen bomb can't get through my desk. That's what we were living with, kids. It was terrifying, and everybody was terrified. So these secret procedures were instigated in order to protect us from nuclear war and not from UFOs. Now, so you've got a divergent thing there. But here's what I've uncovered, and we will get back to it and let you guys start asking questions. But this is the breaking news. You guys need to get this out there now because it has not aired yet. Here's the secret documents. Okay, like I said, man, we've been looking for years, and for 70 years, we've been looking at space photographs. And everyone says, well, I can't find a UFO, but we'll find some little anomaly, but we can't see it clearly. And we say, well, I don't know what that is. And we do photo analysis, and it looks like this, it looks like that. Well, here's the reason why. And this is the other thing, too. Have you ever, what do you think? Let me ask you a question. What do you think when NASA officials stand in front of Congress and they put one hand on the Bible and they raise the other hand and they swear to tell the truth? So help me God. And they say, we don't have any UFO images. Have you ever heard that?
I have, yeah. And I think they're full of poo-poo.
Everybody's heard that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just leaves everyone with a bad feeling. Everyone is thinking, well, we know better, right? It's basically, how can you stand there and blatantly lie to us is usually what happens. And it's the pressure that's put on NASA. Well, here's the headline breaking news that in my third book will highlight to you and explain step by step, document by document. They weren't lying. They don't have any UFO photographs. And the reason is right here in these 3 National Reconnaissance Office top secret memos that are released from Freedom of Information Act. And they do go as far. The first one, you know what? It's from, okay, where's the quote? Well, here's the quote. Here's the document. Top secret National Reconnaissance Office directed, dated August 9th, 1965, Brockway McMillan, confirming intelligence authority over space-based imagery. The National Reconnaissance Office was secret till 1992, guys. Okay. It started about 1960, I think. It's like a carryover, too, from the early Army maps and other G2 stuff. But that's why I didn't go directly to the NRO files, because I didn't even know about it until I was an old man, okay? 1992, it finally been said, hey, yeah, we've had this for all these years. But that's Brockway McMillan is the first scientist who was in charge of that. In 1965, he makes this memo. And in the memo, he says the following. Now, this is it's only a 4-page memo, but I'm going to read you the sequential things. And the last one is the important one that the next 2 memos will confirm. Okay. The first thing that he confirms, he's talking to Dr. Robert Siemens, the Washington, D.C. head of NASA, right? 1965, they had just flown the Gemini 5 mission. And he says to Robert Siemens, all Gemini acquired photography, both NASA and Department of Defense sponsored, is processed at the Manned Spacecraft Center Photographic Laboratory in Houston. And that's where Richard Underwood is in charge, right? Okay. So McMillan then continues, I question whether either of those delegations is appropriate to matters of potential national and international concern. Number one, NASA was supposed to be a civilian authority, right? It was not supposed to be associated with the Defense Department at all. That was their crowning pleasure or treasure. And that's what they would say, too. We are civilian. We are not. Well, right here, you hear them saying that they're sponsoring Department of Defense photography on there. So that's the first secret given away. They weren't just doing civilian photography. So that was on the mission. He further states, now, this is one of the departments you need to understand. It's called NPIC, the National Photographic Interpretive Center, and I've got all kinds of documents explaining its in the creation and the equipment that he uses. In fact, I have the list of the lithograph machines that they purchased that are used to make the lithograph that you will see that you saw earlier. And this is what it says. In the Washington area, the National Photographic Interpretation Center has a unique capability for both quality processing and interpretation of aerial photographs. I believe it would be our mutual benefit to transfer responsibility for processing, orientation, and interpretation of future Gemini or similar series photographs from the Mission Control Center to the National Photographic Interpretive Center, which of course is the CIA's photo arm. Okay? Now, here's what comes up. It's the film interception recommendation. And this is the most striking part. Since you will probably wish to avoid any arrangement which infers the involvement of NASA in a classified endeavor, I recommend that procedures for high-speed delivery of exposed Department of Defense and NASA film from the aircraft carrier to MPIC be arranged in a manner which will preclude contact with or reference to either the National Reconnaissance Office or the National Photographic Interpretation Center by NASA personnel or Department of Defense personnel on duty with NASA who are not properly cleared for National Reconnaissance Program access. He wants to pick the film up off the recovery aircraft carrier.
Mm-hmm.
That's NASA film. Now listen, here's what comes next. McMillan then proposes a specific mechanism for obtaining the film. Listen to this name. As a suggestion, it may be feasible for Colonel Sweet of your security staff to arrange pickup and delivery of the film. I would make arrangements for release with the Department of Defense material to him or his representative on the carrier. Those come from McMillan. Okay? He's the head of the secret organization at that time, the National Reconnaissance Office. Now, there's two more short memos, and I want you to remember the name Colonel Sweet in there, because this is the continuous, the documentary chain, and this is also in that same release trove of treasure. And it says, following the review, Gordon Cooper mentioned to me that he had called Dr. Siemens earlier in the week to express his concern about the handling of NASA film. He stated that he was, quote, damned unhappy with the arrangements, and had he known that Colonel Sweet was picking up all the film, he would have had a fist fight on his hands aboard the carrier because he damn sure wouldn't have taken the NASA film. Wow. That's astronaut Gordon Cooper, American hero. And then he goes on to say this, and this always reminds me of Captain Kirk, when Captain Kirk would say, I'm a Starfleet officer. He stated further that this was supposed to be a national program and should be handled in that fashion. He stated that he was speaking as a NASA man. He indicated they would not hear the end of this. And the funny thing is, Scott Simpkinson, the engineer, right? He went by everybody, and all the memos talk of him like Scotty. Okay, they call him Scotty. I have letters from the astronauts, and they say Scotty. They don't say Scott Simpkinson, and they say Scotty. Mr. Simpkinson, no, it's Scotty to everybody. And he was the mission control chief engineer, okay? He was the chief for mission control. He built some of the early blockhouses, okay? But here he was going by Scotty, and I couldn't help but laugh because when I heard Gordon Cooper sounding just like Captain Kirk and threatening to have a fist fight, and then next you hear this memo with Scotty, okay? And this is the memo I've been searching for 3 years, because you wonder, well, why on earth would this engineer at NASA get this classified briefing document with the image of the UFO? And the reason I discovered now is in this memo. A memorandum dated September 3rd records a meeting involving Scott Simpkinson. Colonel McKee received a call indicating that Mr. Simpkinson was quite upset after having learned that all the film was not turned over to Mr. Gammon the night before. Colonel McKee asked Mr. Simpkinson in to meet with him and me. The gent was quite upset. Quite in his concern, took quite some doing. Scott Simpkinson was following all the NASA film. He was the chief engineer. He was the safety officer. If anyone needed to know of anomalous objects in space, it was him. He was the chief engineer. He was also the chief safety engineer. He was the one they put in charge of the Apollo 1 tragedy when the 3 astronauts burned to death on the floor of their space capsule in the high oxygen content. They put him in charge of the report. I've got a copy of the 60-page report. And the reason they put him in charge was because of his reliable secret keeping capabilities ever since 1943, working for Lewis Field and NACA, and his paper was damning, and he was the one that they trusted because it showed how flagrantly NASA had let those guys burn. They had not done the right thing, and those men died needlessly due to some pretty shoddy work on NASA's. And Scott Simpkinson is the one that they put in charge of it, and he's the one who I have the one copy of this safety report, not the safety report, the mission failure report during Apollo 13. And not only that, you can see him. I'm having talked with his nephew. He said that he was his nephew says that he and Emily both spent all their time during the Apollo 13 crisis sleeping in their office there at NASA. And he says on the Apollo 13 movie, there's a scene where it's actually Scott Simpkinson that they're representing, and it's a real neat scene where they have a round air filter, carbon dioxide filter, and a square carbon dioxide filter, one from the limb and one from the other one, yada, yada, yada. They have to make them work and take socks off and tubing and stuff to make that. But there's a scene in there where they present the solution before those guys suffocate in CO2. And there's one scene in there where who is it? The launch coordinator turns to the little engineer guy and he looks at him. And when he sees that it worked and that the oxygen levels are going up, he says, "You, sir, are a steely-eyed missile man." And that represented Scott Simpkinson for coming up with the solution to that problem. He's been, the records, all the NASA records, he died in 1996, right when they started the oral histories. I think the reason they started the NASA oral histories was because he died before anyone recorded all that thing, and everybody was dying off and they didn't have anything. So these oral histories are a treasure trove. You should hear the things that they went to Scotty for. When they wanted to get the space shuttle back from California after the first launch back to Cape Canaveral, oh my goodness gracious, you know what? They had engineers working on it, and they had a thing, I think it was called the pregnant guppy, okay? They took the shuttle and they put it on a specially built 747 liner, right? So here you got this big space shuttle on top of the 747 liner, and they can't get permission from Congress or from the FAA to get it back. And then the guy says, "Go see Scotty." And the engineer who was in charge of that says, "I can't get it home. I know it'll work." Blah, 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 blah. Cry. Scott Simpkinson said, just go ahead and load it on. I'll take care of it. The next day, Washington had approved the flight. That's who he was. Amazing, isn't it? This guy was really something else. I've got dozens of pages of document. Now, here's the other thing. You look at that lithograph. I've got 5 scientists in the first book did reports, and they're all included in the scientific appendix on there. But number one, here's the first thing you got to look at. Okay, I authenticated everything to the ability that I had money to do it. I spent $5,000 back when a Whopper was 2 for $5. Okay, so I don't know. That was a lot of money to me. And I went to a company called Microtrace Incorporated in Chicago, Illinois. Microtrace Incorporated usually does analysis of paper products and agent data and stuff like that for Scotland Yard. Okay, wow. And multi-million dollars. I've got it's an 80-page report is in the first volume, okay? Right, and it's consistent. It shows that the age is consistent exactly with what is purported to be a 1966 piece of paper, okay? Now, there's lots of things in there, and there's so many details I'm aware of that I can't share with some. You will see that there's the fountain solution that was used to use it leaves an imprint on there, and that's why you see latent images of unclassified across the thing. And some people say, well, that could be a watermark on there too. And I don't have time to explain everything. I can talk for every item on here for 10 or 15 minutes, okay? But, I can't explain to you that that's not the only image on there. Those are the ones that are easiest to read. Before artificial intelligence got sufficiently advanced, I couldn't make out the other ones. But there's the documents and numbers and letters on there. There's a whole treasure trove of information that's in there that proves that these things are not fabrications. So that's and right there. Right now, we deal with artificial intelligence, and we deal with fabrication and lies and deceit, and we deal with skies that you can't even see anything in the sky anymore. Used to be you could put a telescope out in the middle of the desert and you could see the stars. Well, you can't anymore. All you can see is Elon Musk's satellites roaming about. I'm not complaining. No, that's great. But I'm just saying things have changed right now. And what I love about this archive is you cannot corrupt the images anymore. You cannot say that these things were fake because it's 1966. It's 1966. These things are in the old files, okay? And that's what we're working on now. So pretty much, I think those 3 documents that I read right there, although there's more, there's hundreds more. I've got 72 pages of document. There's a cool one, okay? Has anyone ever proven to you? Have you ever heard anyone ask? I wonder if they told the astronauts not to talk about what they're seeing.
Okay, I got to jump in there just because Stuart was talking about that earlier, and he wanted to ask that question, like what?
I'm not asking
exactly that, So,
yeah, what were they told? Weren't they briefed? You're like, you're going to see some strange things, but you need to keep your mouth shut. Why was it a surprise?
September 9th, 1965. Memorandum for record. Subject: astronaut sightings of objects in space. The attached memoranda was prepared for the GT5 Gemini 5, but not introduced since we had our hands full with photo control. Okay, and we just went over the photo control, right? But so they didn't get this in time for Gemini 5. It is still valid and should be considered for subsequent flights. Paul Worthman, Colonel, United States Air Force, secret document. Next page. Memorandum for Dr. McMillan, head of National Reconnaissance Office, who issued the last decree. Draft, August 1965. Subject: Gemini astronaut visual sightings. Related to the August 9th letter, 65, and some redaction, to Dr. Siemens, concerning classification of Gemini-acquired photography, is the reporting of visual sightings by the astronauts. Assuming that you may wish to discuss this matter with Dr. Siemens, avoiding the necessity of another repetitive memo, following are some pertinent points. 1, we cannot constrain the astronauts from talking about things or events they see. 2, they should report all sightings, but should constrain potentially embarrassing real-time details, i.e., exact description of unusually configured space vehicles, markings denoting national origin, etc. This latter constraint is to be enforced pending confirmation by space stats of positions of space debris described and political ramifications, i.e., possible intentional rendezvous for inspection of USSR satellites. Like I say, these things were made secret to stop war. They weren't about UFOs, okay? So apparently they were rendezvousing with Soviet satellites too, taking pictures, and who knows, maybe even collecting some of them. 3, it is possible, but improbable, in line with the next paragraph, that astronauts could cite and verbally report on classified NRP, National Reconnaissance Program. Things become, here's the other thing you need to understand, things are programs in the CIA first before they can become offices. So he's still calling it the National Reconnaissance Program, while the memo's been documented in Mellon, and it's already the National Reconnaissance Office, but it was secret from 60 to 93. It is possible that could verbally report unclassified U.S. satellites, which, of course, we're talking about the Corona satellite, right? Remember the Corona? Top secret. That's where the Byman clearance comes from, right? It's where Q clearance comes from, right? All these things that we hear about, and you need to understand the history and infer from them forward. Since NRP activities go into polar orbit, what did I tell you earlier about polar orbit, right? You can't photograph the Soviet Union from the equatorial orbit, right? Yeah. Since NRP activities go into polar orbit, and since Gemini is on a Mercury type or near equatorial orbit, the rate, time, and directions of closure are not compatible for detailed sightings. 5. Because of possibility, albeit remote, of sightings, NRP satellites, or associated debris, NASA should coordinate details on such visual sightings with both SPADATS, confirmation of identity, and National Reconnaissance Office appropriateness prior to public release of details of such sightings. So there is the smoking gun. There's your memo. There you go. Astronauts are not to report details. They are to report sightings, which they do. But then there's deletions, too, also from the voice transcripts. You'll find that in my first book. The first thing I did was I went to all the voice transcripts, and I read them through time and time again. I came up with about 5 instances of sightings of things that we didn't know what they were, and they didn't know what they were, too. Here's the best one. It's the one that's first in my book. It's got highlights in it, and it happens about 54 hours, 34 minutes into the flight. Both the astronauts on Gemini 11 are just finishing their 856-mile record-setting orbit, which was the highest ever until last summer. Remember last summer we went 880 miles higher, something like that? And that's Gemini 11, 1966, held the record up until then. Anyways, they finished that record-setting orbit. They came back. They did an artificial gravity experiment where they tethered themselves to the Gina spacecraft, and then they revolved slowly. And the first case and they actually experienced artificial gravity from the slow revolution, where they let loose of a pin, and the pin would float up against the wall. It happened immediately after the release of the tether, and that would be their final rendezvous with the. It wouldn't be their final rendezvous, but for the next day, it would be the last they say goodbye to the Agena capsule. So they unhooked the orbit from the Agena capsule, and when they unhooked from that orbit, this is what happened, and this is what's recorded in the voice transcript, because they were supposed to start the D-15 experiment. Okay? And the reason that they waited until they unhooked from maneuvering with the Agena was because the Agena and the D-15 experiment was the first orthocon TV camera in space. It was a night vision experiment for being able to track objects at night. Here's the synthesis of what happens when equatorial orbit is done by these early manned spacecraft. It's about a 90-minute transition around the Earth one time. 45 minutes of that time is spent in the absence of sunlight and in the darkness. 45 minutes is spent in the sunlight and in the daylight. The problem is this: they need certain activities that they want to do, tracking maneuvers, and they want to be able to track things on the Earth. And of course, this is obviously for military reconnaissance purposes, although that's not what's stated in the mission. But the human eye has an interesting peculiarity in that when you put a human in a dark room, that human does not get full night vision for 20 minutes. So there's 45 minutes of night on each orbit, and during that time, they don't have the visual acuity to do the tracking jobs that they want done for a full 20 minutes. So that was the portion of the D-15 orthocon tube D experiment. And here's how it worked. It was the first TV camera in space. It was back behind the capsule, and inside it was an RCA camera. It looks like it's about 18 inches long with the camera on there. But you know what? It's inside the spaceship, and what they do in order for them to get the camera's image, there's a flap on the outside of the spaceship, and once they've done and quit maneuvering with the thruster rockets, because the thruster rockets emit gas, right? They don't want any gas to get on the lens of that camera. The flap opens up. It's a mirror. It's a periscope. And the camera shoots down through the mirror and the periscope and does the D15 experiment. I have 16,000 frames of footage from the National Archives that I got. The guys at Color Lab told me I'm the only person who ever asked it out. That's
Holy
the
crap.
basis of the second book. And they're high. And the guy at National Archives was very cooperative with me, a really cool guy. I think he works at George Washington University as a professor too. But I told him, look, from what I've seen in the voice transcripts, there's at least 3 instances where UFOs were caught in that D15 experiment. It's also corroborated, and you'll see the page in the mission or debriefing. In the debriefing, they ask about the D15 experiment. In the D15 experiment, they say, did you see any anomalies? Well, I'm getting ahead because here's what happened. Boom. They open the flap on that thing. They're not going to do any more maneuvering because the gas would get all over that lens. And they want to do the D15 experiment. They're recording. What it is the camera is back in behind them and periscope looking through it. And he's looking through. The astronaut working the D15 experiment is looking in like a radar. If any of you have ever done radar on a boat, they have a night thing. When you're doing your night radar, there's a plastic hood and you stick your nose right up against it and it seals all the light out and you can see the radar screen, and that's how you navigate. So that's what they had, and the astronaut was looking at that, but it wasn't a radar screen. It was a television image. It was the RCA orthicon tube camera. So it was an electronic image on a television tube that he was looking through. But because they didn't know how well it would work and they wanted to be able to see for themselves, they provided him with a switch that he was holding in his hand. So he's looking in the screen with one hand, with his eyes, and then he's holding in his other hand a switch with a button on it. Now, that experiment ran, I forget how many hours, but it was more than one orbit. I think it was like 3 to 5 orbits somewhere in there that they ran that experiment. Of course, they went into daylight too during that time, and each time they went into night, they would continue it. And then they did some other experiments with it also that weren't the D15 experiment. But the important thing is this. They told him, anytime you see something unusual that you don't understand, now he's seeing the TV screen and they can't see it. They say, if you see something unusual, press the button and it will record it on film. Well, that's the 16,000 frames of film that I got from the National Archives. And you have the voice transcripts and they're talking about what happens. So it's, and I'm missing a key element here that I wanted to point out. Oh, the key element is the first voice transcript that I love. And because here's what happened at 54 hours, I think 34 minutes somewhere in there. The second that they released themselves from the Agena capsule, they've completed it, and the D15 is supposed to open the flap immediately after that. And they open the flap, and this is the voice transcripts. Now, I don't have it in front of me, but you can read it. And this is pretty close word for word and time for time because it's recorded down to the second. These voice transcripts are to the second, kids. You got to read accurate things. And here's what it says. One of the astronauts says to the other, Conrad says, "Did something just fly over your head?" And the other astronaut says, "Yes, it did." So they confirm they see something out the window fly by. So and one of them says, "I think should we turn around and look?" And the other one, there's a little bit of confusion in there. And we're only talking seconds in this conversation. The conversation was only 3 minutes. And the next thing you know, as soon as it's flown over, they confirm that they both see it. Mission Control gets on the radio and says, "Listen, guys, will you check your stack 5C Charlie for us, please?" I didn't know it the first time I read it through. I had to read about 10 times through the complete mission before I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because there's a big gap in voice. And they said, will you check your stack 5C? And they said, yes, it's reading 0 amps, 0 voltage. And then they go ahead and say, this is something else. And at that moment, okay, and that's within 1 minute of seeing the UFO fly over their heads. That stack 5C, Charlie, is the battery that runs, one of the batteries that runs the spaceship. Have you ever heard of the UFO electromagnetic effect? What is the UFO?
I was just gonna say, like,
What
so
is the UFO? Yeah.
that's the same
What
thing
is
as
it?
when the cars turned off when they went
Bingo.
over and then they turned back
Bingo.
on. Yeah.
Bingo. Exactly. And I didn't know it because it was stack 5C. It's not like you're saying, well, my battery's dead, but that's what it was. Now, here's what happened next, all within 1 minute of that. The voice transmission goes quiet for 6 minutes. You've just had an emergency. The battery's dead. One of them, there's more of them. I think there's like probably 5 or 6 of them in their backups, but that one died. Electromagnetic effect UFO. We saw a UFO, our battery went dead, and now there's no voice recording for 6 minutes. Well, I think it's probably reasonable to think that they were having some big discussions when the battery went dead, don't you? It's not in there for 6 minutes, so that's been cut out. So then, after that 6 minutes, you hear the conversation comes back on, and it says, "Oh, yes, are we on? Are we recording now? Yes."
Okay.
So that's in the first. That's the first voice transmission. So that's what told me the D15 went on. Now you get into the technical debriefing. In the technical debriefing, when they ask about the D15, they say, "Hey, it worked great," and you can see they've got some great pictures there. The D15 experiment shows the Earth, and that's the cover of the second book. So bring the cover of the second book up, and what you're looking at is you're looking at a frame from the D15 experiment that was taken when he pressed the button on it. And not only are you looking at the frame, but the time constraints on it. I didn't use one with the clock on it, but there are other clock images in there also. That's one of those things. And if you look at the bottom of that frame, what you have is this. The film from the previous film should match what's shown in the bottom where you see that UFO. Do you see that big glowing UFO in the bottom on the book too? Look at that thing. What is that? Well, we'll be able to tell better because when we go to the recording before that, so the clock gets recorded on top of the previous film. And so whatever's showing in the bottom of the clock image should be on the previous film. It's not. It's gone. It's been deleted. But they didn't delete everything because it stayed in the image you see. And there's only about 6 of those. 6 frames per second is what that thing recorded at. So that's just one of them. The other one, there's other ones that, who was it? Dr. Brown. I owe a lot to him. He took the one UFO that matches the same configuration. I know I've sent that to you too. Bring that up. Look at the configuration of the Simpkinson Lithograph UFO with the strange lights. Now, guys, those aren't portholes, okay? We're talking about a massive amounts of energy. We're talking about metamaterials. We're talking about energy that has to be dispersed into space. Good Lord, half of the space station is just radiators, right? You can't get rid of that thermal energy in space. So if we're having these tremendous thermal energy surges and use being made with the metamaterial halls on technology beyond us, those portholes, and that's why people thought, well, it's a fake. They didn't even do a good job. How come they didn't make all the portholes perfectly square? Duh, you just proved my point. They're not portholes. What you're looking at is plasma-like energy dispersion of an active system maneuvering in front of your eyes. Who would think to fake that? Look at the aura around that spacecraft. This was before the auras were described. Good Lord, guys, there's all kinds of evidence. I can just go on and on and on. But so there you see, those are some interesting things. So that's the second book. The second book is all an analysis of 16,000 frames of film. Oh my gosh, there's one section in there that's just beautiful. Hopefully I sent you a picture. I call it the blue flying saucer. And look at it. That's from the frame. You can see the frame number there. And there's a blue lenticular flying saucer. I mean, you can see the lights of the portholes. And we call them portholes because that's good enough, right? We know what we're talking about anyways.
Yeah.
But when you look at the actual lithograph and you see the difference in the sizes of them, you're looking at active manipulation of energy. And that's what substantiates it more than anything else. So here's the other thing. There's all kinds of evidence about it. Some of the best evidence of why this is a briefing document is as follows. Now, I remember the Bay of Pigs incident and the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay? During the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had the U-2 craft flying over top of Cuba taking pictures of the missiles, right? Well, I remember watching on TV President Kennedy holding that up on the black and white screen. Well, guess what? That was a sanitized briefing document that he held up. Look at today's Gulf War photographs, okay? You ever see those images of them blowing and stuff up over in the Gulf today? Look at the top of the screen where it says unclassified, okay? And then I want you to look at the word unclassified on the lithograph. They haven't changed the lettering at all. What unclassified means is this: it's been sanitized. So what you're seeing on TV when it says unclassified, you can't pick up very much information. They delete the information, they degrade the information. And that is what a sanitized briefing document is. And that's what the MPIC was a specialist in. It goes back to 1957 and 58. I have the actual CIA documents detailing all the equipment that they bought for the National Photographic, it's called Project HT Automat. And that sounds pretty innocuous, doesn't it? We all think of an automat from like 1911. Those automats in New York City where everyone went to have their lunch and it was scientific and modern and harmless and wonderful and stuff. But the whole book there's 2 volumes of it, about 80 documents in each one of them that I discovered. And the HT automat actually stood for high-speed targeting automation. It's the government's way of doing high-speed targeting information. When that U-2 plane flew over those missile sites, he was extracting, definitely targeting information, because we want to be able to destroy those things as quickly as possible. So a whole department was created, the National Photographic Interpretive Center, which they would fly the stuff right off the recovery carrier to them and get it developed overnight and then get it to Houston before they even got off the carrier, right? No one ever knew this happened. I read you the actual documents there in the book. Read them for yourself. You can find them online. That's what the National Photographic Interpretive Center did. And so these briefing boards, the lithograph machines that they have, I've got the list of the actual, I forget them. There's 2 lithograph companies, but and that's not important. That's all detailed in there. But the National Photographic Interpretive Center, that's what they did. They provided briefing documents, and there's all kinds of instances of things that they used it for. They created things, what was in 1957? Now, you have to remember, times were different back then, and the world's always filled with hate anyway, so don't bother me about what I'm going to tell you. But this is what's in the documents themselves. The CIA document talks about Dago Dazzlers. And what the Dago Dazzlers were specifically was they were working down in South America, and they wanted to do surreptitious activities. And in order to do that, they had to do with some military dictatorships, and they called them Dagos. And it was a Dago Dazzler, which means that they just fictitiously made some documents that looked real. They would take them down, present it to the generals in charge, and the Dagos were dazzled, yada, 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 and they got their way. Now, this is the other thing. We were talking about some of the danger that's involved with all this work. Let me tell you, you can get this right from the Johnson Space Center, Oral Histories, Richard Underwood. And it's actually, I think, only on page 2 of his 41-page oral history. And you want to know how serious these things are taken and why it was a matter of life and death and why this secrecy was made to protect fearful people. Page 2, Richard Underwood's oral history. Richard Underwood was a war hero. He was a CB offloading live cases of ammunition onto the beaches during World War II. Okay. Obviously, a brave man, came home, got his education, followed geology and photography and photo analysis and stuff. And you'll find that almost all the photo analysts that come into the government purview come from the geological surveys being done where you would map the United States continentally. We needed maps. We need mineral maps. We need forestry maps. We need maps just to build roads. And that's where they come from at the whole field in college. Well, that's where they got their people for photo interpretation at the National Photographic Interpretive Center. He was working in Honduras. And while he was in Honduras, he met a young lady and he married her. And this is quote verbatim. Look it up. I believe it's page 2. When the general I was working for learned that I had married her, he called me into his office and he said, and this is in quotes, "I should take you out and have you shot without a trial."
Nope.
Did you hear that, kids? Kids, read it for yourself. Don't believe this old fool, okay? Read it for yourself. So this is really some interesting things. And there's all kinds of interesting film. The original NASA film, here's how you can tell. Do you know how you can tell an original NASA negative from any other negative?
I don't.
Well, you can read it right in Richard Underwood's testimony. The way you can tell it is this. NASA's space film was the thickness of saran wrap. So, you want Congress to prove that they've got the originals? You want Congress to show that they're looking at the original negatives? It's only the thickness of saran wrap. Anything else of a different variant thickness is another generation of copy, right? Generations of copies, all they got back. And then there's another memo in there from the National Reconnaissance Office about the degradation of the resolution. The resolution was degraded. The NASA film, they say right in the National Reconnaissance Office memos, and they're in my book, and they're in the reports that I've sent you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It said some of the NASA images, they were going over, I forget the Air Force Base, Andrews Air Force Base, and one of the NASA photos had a resolution where it could resolve a 20-foot bar on the Air Force Base. So the NASA resolution with just their cameras, not the special lenses that were being used for the Department of Defense experiment, but their resolution was as good as 20 feet. Okay? Pretty cool, huh? That's pretty neat from space. And that's just a normal Hasselblad 500 camera with that special saran wrap thick film. So there's all these interesting facts here that can corroborate and lead the trail. You guys got a lot to do. But here's the interesting thing. The next part of the memo says this. The National Reconnaissance Office has determined that the danger level of resolution for photographic back engineering is 60 feet. So anything better than 60 feet resolution, we consider a threat. So you have the one statement, the Andrews Air Force Base picture is 20 feet. Then his decree, 60 feet, is the absolute minimum. Anything of 60 feet is still bad for us. And then you have the inner positives that were sent back to NASA. And it says right there, we tested the inner positives. The resolution was 100 feet. They've been degraded. Our images were degraded. NASA didn't get them. NASA got inner positives back. And then, of course, Scott Simpkinson, the massively important engineer, important for the safety of all the space flights, the chief mission control engineer, built the early blockhouses, built all the major components of the Mercury program. This man right there, with his secret classification going back to 1943, was in line to receive the lithograph. Now here, so why do you need lithographs, guys? I tried to give you an idea of what they're important for. You got to get that out to a lot of people. The president has to see those Cuban missiles immediately, right? But he can't be going to a secure skiff to see that stuff. So they create the MPIC. The MPIC does a lithograph. There's nothing better than a lithograph from hiding information, right? You can't get much, you can't back engineer it. And here's the best piece of evidence for the NASA briefing document that I have. Are you guys familiar with a gentleman named Nick West?
Heard
He
the
does
name.
Metabunk is his website, I think. And Mick West is a phenomenally bright, brilliant individual. And I finally watched a couple of his videos where he debunks UFOs. He's a genius. He's a genius. What does he prove, and why is he the best evidence for my debriefing document? Because he is able, simply from photography, to back engineer all the details you need to prove or disprove a theory. And it's brilliant deduction, brilliant induction, very, very talented. And that's exactly what a Russian engineer would do with a 20-foot resolution NASA photograph. And we had NASA photographs of our aircraft here. Mick West is the best argument for the validity of a NASA briefing document that I could ask for. Now, his point of view is, that it's not real, and that's fine. I'm not saying that, I've got enough evidence now. I'm pretty skeptical about anything. Like I said, I think you could see from my philosophy that I don't believe anybody, just because I just feel like I'm vulnerable in the world. I'm not the brightest guy. I'm easy to take advantage of, so I'm a skeptic. But I've worked at this for so long, and I've amassed so much evidence, and I can keep going for hours and hours on all the specific details we have. Guys, I believe I've come across something that's real and valid. And I think the documents I showed you today portray a lot of what I wanted to get across. So, with that said, thank you, Mick West. You proved exactly why we have to have briefing documents. And we have to have, the information has got to get out to so many people. Little guys like Scott Simpkinson, who's responsible for the safety of these guys. Not only that, but he's certainly going to be a great, he was a, in mission control chief engineer. If anyone could explain that UFO, he would be the guy you would want to show it to. But you have to sanitize it. On TV today, you're looking at unclassified film footage, and you look at it and you can't make heads or tails of it. And like you said, when you get into that darn Department of War stuff, half that stuff, you look at it and you're seeing balls of light and this and that and the other. Well, kids, put that lithograph up again and look at that UFO and that thing. Now, here's the other thing, and then we'll go on to answer some questions for you guys. I do enjoy questions. I'm just afraid the battery will run out, and that'll be the last book here. And there you go. This is the one that I want you to find and get, because it goes into heavy depth. There are dozens and dozens of CIA documents that I have listed in here that portray all the facts that we've been talking about now, including the one where Brockway McMillan says, we're going to take their film, where Cooper says, over my dead body, and where Simpkinson says, what the F do you think you're doing? So those three are in there too, along with the document showing you that, hey, guess what? They were instructed not to talk about what they saw, weren't they? All kinds of good stuff in there. There's documents there talking about, you want to read where Underwood was threatened with death, and that wasn't the only time either. That's in there. I'll give you the exact page number. These things are really bad reading. I'm not that good of a writer, but that's not my purpose, is not to write an easily read book. My purpose is to ferret out the facts and give you the exact pages and the exact text. I don't want to give you my watered down version. I don't want to give you my inferences. I want you to go for yourself and look at it. And I want you to go to archive such as March to the Moon, Arizona State University. And what you see on the cover of this book right here is as follows. That cover of the book shows three images. The big image on the outside, you can find at Arizona State University, March to the Moon. It is NASA Hasselblad 500 photograph number S6654585. What you're looking at right there is you're looking at the Ageno capsule with the tether that was just released at the start of the D15 experiment. Remember explaining that to you? You see the tether hanging down from the Agena capsule? That is online. You can look at it. It's high definition. You can expand it. You can see that. But here's the other image in here. And that image is subtly black right about there. It's subtly black. That's from the 12-year secret Gemini 11 mission report. You can download all those too, 500 or 354 pages. Explains every single experiment in there, every piece of equipment. And then if you look at the right-hand corner of that of the Arizona State University image, look at the exact cloud pattern match of the UFO. And it takes up 4% of the space. It's a sanitized briefing document. Why is that UFO only 4% of the space? Because you cannot back engineer. From that lithograph alone, you would never be able to tell where that came from, guys. Unless you're an eccentric old man who spent hour after hour going over those photographs and having a pretty good spatial memory and able to see that little 4%, if I magnified it, it would match exactly.
I'm grateful that you've done that, sir.
Dang.
Well, guys, how great it is to finally get able to talk to you guys. I admire what you do so much. Oh, and by the way, this year I went and saw Tommy Emmanuel, Australia's finest guitarist.
Oh, wow.
As far as I'm concerned, the world's finest guitarist. Second time I've seen him, and I bought backstage passes both times. And I went and I brought him a signed copy of my book when we were backstage. Wow. And it was great. And I had a chance to talk to him because no one else wanted to pay for backstage passes. So me and my girlfriend, we just sat there and talked to him. And I asked him about UFOs in Australia. And he explained to me about how when he was young, he and his family, who were musicians, would travel the outback. And it would be nothing for them to traverse 300 miles from gig to gig across the outback of Australia. And he, in his youth, saw 2 UFOs in the outback. So he lives in California now. I love the guy. And obviously he thinks I'm a crackpot. But gee, who doesn't? Okay. I do the best I can. I have a special set of skills, though. And my special set of skills seems to be working to my advantage right now. And I'm just happy to share with you guys. The important thing is, you guys out there, take this stuff and run with it. I'm so glad that I got this 3rd book done before I died. Just because, truth is important. And like I say, as a rare book dealer, I save stuff from the trash can. And I think that's what I've done here, is I've saved information from the trash can of history. And you guys can make it true. See if you can get Congress to look into this. Find that S6. Oh, and that's the other thing. If you read right to the left of the Apollo 17 Department of War release, on the left-hand column, and I sent you the other photograph that you can compare to it with the 2 UFOs. You know what it says right there before you download the image? It says, we have determined that this image probably represents a real object, not a photo flare, not this, not that, not the other. But we are not releasing more until we do a study of the original negative. So you wanted to know what the Department of War released that they didn't know they released? They didn't know that they proved my point that everyone's working from degraded images. And they say right there, yes, it is something, but now we got to study the original film. So there's your Department of War headline. You're right. And it is a bunch of garbage. You and I have heard all those stories for years and years. We study them. We search for truth in them. It's hard to find it. But, it's just not there that we found as much as what they released right there. Right there is confirmation of my 3rd book, right on that Department of War. So go there, page 16, the first one, Apollo 11. Read, before you download the image, read what it says right there. It's saying, we think this is real. It's not a photo thing, but we have to use the original negative. And the original report that I have from the Pentagon, it says that it's using the March to the Moon images. So they knew that.
Now,
Pretty cool stuff,
excuse
boys.
me for a minute, Ed. Mike, can we film an ending now in case we lose Ed?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. I do have some questions for you if we have the time, though. So Ed, I would definitely want to say thank you for your time and this amazing conversation here. And I think we need to talk to you again for sure. But before we start to sign off here, can you just tell everybody out there real quick? Do you have a website or anything where people can go to find?
I'll do this now and make the distinction here on YouTube. Go to Gemini 11 UFO. But it's Gemini XI, not 11, Gemini 11 UFO, and it's by Seth Lamancusa, Lamancusa. Seth is my IT partner. He's a developer, AI developer. He put that together the very first year that we got together. We got together working with Professor Brown at Ohio State University, who you've got some images that he's done there. There have been some good people there. Dr. Knuth from New York SUNY did a wonderful comparison. Of course, Leslie Keene, I owe a debt of gratitude to, because she was the first person to even take an interest in the picture. And so she was great. The other scientist out there at Wellesley College, mathematician, astronomer. I've forgotten his name. Please forgive me, guys. But there's been a lot of people that have helped me, and now it's coming to the point. Yeah, come on out, guys. Come see me out in Washington. I think it's going to rock. It's called what did I say it was called? The Disclosure Forum. It's going to be in the office building, the Rayburn building, and I'll be in some hotel. What is it? The Royal Sonesta, Washington, D.C. Capitol Hotel. I'll be there for a week. I'll get there Monday. The actual hearing will be on Wednesday, and then I'll be there till the following Sunday. So look forward to doing any information or meeting anybody who wants to discuss this.
Okay.
But yeah, Seth has drop boxes there, and when you look at his 11-minute video, he's a great kid, and I call anyone a kid. He's a man, I guess. Hopefully he doesn't hear me saying that. I still tell him, you tell your mom I'm paying you good. He will tell you I do that. Don't let your mom think you're working for free, okay? So I guess I treat him like a kid. He's allowed to be angry if he wants to. He's a good kid. He's got Dropbox, and you can write him. He's got his email address, and you can download by request from the Dropboxes all the stuff from the first video. And it's a great video he did. It's cool. Oh, and I'm looking for a documentary filmmaker. I've got 16,000 plus frames of films and document. We could really bust something out, guys. Get in contact with me.
Well, that's actually one of my questions. Was that that's a video? Do you have an actual NASA video in your possession?
Yes, I had to download it through the National Archives. I ordered it from the National Archives. Once I found it, I knew that the D15 experiment had at least 3 instances of them describing UFOs, okay? And I said, well, geezy cow. There's 3 times they're talking about weird things during the D15 experiment, and I know that it's a movie camera running at 6 frames per second, but I've never heard of it. No one's ever heard of it. So I did some research onto it, and lo and behold, I wrote to the National Archives and said, can you help me find it? Say, yeah, we got a copy. And so then I got in touch with, you have to go through 3 labs. There's only 3 labs that are authorized by Congress to work with National Archives footage, okay? I went with the oldest one, Color Lab, I believe is the name. We had to have more than one because we need to have, we had to diversify the number of companies that can do that kind of work. But I went with Color Lab because they were the original one when there was no other. And so they have records of the oldest records I know. And the guy I talked with there told me that he says, I don't see anyone having ever ordered this before. And so I had him he was a great guy. I said, look, I'm going to pay all this money for this crap. I don't know if there's even going to be anything on there, okay? I don't even know. But I want to get the best, highest reproduction you can get. And he says, well, we don't have it here at the lab, but I can go out and I can buy super high definition, whatever you call those computer thingies that they downloaded on. And he says, I will do that. And I say, make me 3 copies. Sent one to my cousin, who's Dr. Diane Powell, the parapsychologist, if you know her. Dr. Diane Powell, she's a wonderful researcher. Her family's all geniuses. Jeezy cower, those kids smart. It's amazing. But so he told me that he would do that, and I got it, and I gave one to Kevin Knuth. But it's so high definition that it's real trouble to download. And goodness, my guy Seth Lamancusa downloaded it. He has it, all 16,000 frames. And there's more to that. There's electromagnetic effects. Holy cow, you'll see them incessant. Electromagnetic effects, something's going on out there. That TV camera is filming things, okay? And they're pushing their button. And you know what? You ever remember an old television show called The Outer Limits? Holy cow, kids, let me tell you. It said, we can control the vertical, we can control the horizontal. The space images that are going on there in that electromagnetic interference are wild. And again, you and I were discussing, I'm saying, see, it's so cool to talk to you guys. You guys are so well versed. You knew exactly what the UAP effect was, the electromagnetic effect. I didn't even have to mention it. When I told you that the battery went dead, your brain lit up and said, wait a minute, isn't that cool? I think it's funny how familiarity finally allows you to make inferences that finally might lead to enlightenment.
Yeah, well, I mean, gosh, I do have a lot more questions for you, but we are getting sort of pressed for time here because I know Reverend Stu has got to get to his service soon. So I'd like to definitely have another chat with you and maybe...
Anytime I've got electric power.
Yeah, exactly.
I spent all afternoon looking at the fallen down trees. It's something.
Okay, well, I mean, at least you're safe, though, right? I mean,
who cares?
So,
I'm old.
But yeah, maybe next time we could just ask you a whole bunch of do like a Q&A.
Listen, you guys are really well versed, so that's absolutely not a problem at all.
Great.
Right now, we'll get it done.
Okay, excellent. So thanks again for your time for now, and we look forward to visiting with you again real soon. And I got so many questions I want to ask you, man. So many questions. So we'll get to those soon, though.
Dr. Stu, thank you, and
thank you, sir.
Have a good service with your friends tonight. God bless you.
Thank you. Much love to you, sir.
Catch you later. All right, Reverend Stu. That was really cool. I personally, honestly, I felt a little rushed, but there was a lot going on today. Ed had some technical difficulties there, and you've got some time constraints as well. So, but I think all in all, like, holy crap, that was like talk about alien download, right? That was
wow.
Like a download.
I can't wait till you add those images, which will be in the final presentation, and we can see what he was referring to there. Now, there was an urgency because he was on his cell phone running off battery. So
yeah,
it was fantastic, though. It was a lot of information. I'm going to have to give this a second watch to absorb some of the things he was talking about. Yeah,
for sure. So many great points that were brought up. I mean, I literally wrote down like 10 to 12 questions while he was talking. And so I do want to have him back again real soon and sort of have like our part 2 Q&A, as it were. Lots of interesting things to ponder here. And I mean, this does sound like it's legitimate stuff that he's talking about. And that's quite, I mean, that... if you didn't, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. If you needed more proof or whatever, right? Like,
you know what I really respect? That members of the public are doing this sort of work and bringing this to the fore, because he's really acting like an analyst.
Yeah.
He's curating the most pertinent information for us to absorb, and integrate into our own knowledge. And I really liked his great attitude towards us too, which was, I found that really a beautiful thing to say to us. So, but definitely a mutual respect society there between us and him.
Yeah, that's always great to get compliments. But no, I mean, he's using his own time, his own money to do it. And I like what he said in the beginning, that it was he's all about the facts, and he starts off as a rare book collector and a rare book dealer of sorts. Like, So that's important here too, because he's used to authenticating things and chain of custody and stuff like that. So, wow. And unsurprisingly, I think it was, I mean, I don't know, these episodes might go out of order based on, I'm not sure when they're going out yet, but, plasma seems to be the new buzzword going around, and I think maybe 2026 is the year of plasma. What do you think, Stuart?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think that's referred to as the fourth state of matter. It's a very interesting subject. Look, there's a whole show we could do on that one, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's a big discussion.
But it's interesting that he touched upon plasma in a case from NASA in outer space from 1965, and my world and my desk, there's a lot of plasma conglomerating around, and it's just weird how it's all sort of hitting me from all angles at the same time, much like a lot of this is.
Well, I'd love to have a discussion with someone about plasma in general. What is it? What's its properties? How do we observe it? I'd find that really interesting.
Well, we do know someone who could talk about that. I don't know if he's willing to have another conversation, but I'll see if we can entice him to come back in.
Thank you, Mike. I'd like that.
But with that, I mean, this is like NASA proof, if you will, and it goes all the way back to the beginning. Like, wow, it definitely puts a whole new outlook on this for me personally, with the idea of, I'm always saying, show me the physical craft, right? I'm tired of the balls of light in the sky or whatever. Well, there's allegedly a physical craft.
Yeah, he filled in a lot of blanks for me about why the pictures look like they do, what the reason or rationale was behind obfuscating these pictures, what the astronauts were told, how people were threatened, how people within the whole paradigm were unhappy with the decisions that were being made. I got a lot of information from that interview, Mike. I was really very grateful.
Yeah, me too. There's some things I want to say that are probably better left unsaid. The old, it irks me a little bit. The information that came out just now, I'm a little PO'd at my government.
Okay.
I
understand.
That's what I'm talking about. So I don't want to be, anyways. So, yeah, I think, that's all I got, man. Take us out, Stuart.
All right. Well, thank you as always for joining us on this amazing journey. And it's always a question of reintegrating or integrating this new information. So please share your thoughts with us in the comments section. We'll leave some links to some of the subjects the guest was talking about. And we look forward to you joining us again. Until then, much love to you.